Okay, good afternoon. We'll arrive finally to our last lecture. Holidays after, it's over. And as you may have seen, I want to speak today about Alexander Colville. I think the subject is evident because of his relation to realism, and this was the main theme of this series, so I thought Colville should be there. And to introduce my subject, I want to make some reflection about the notion of the double, the doppelganger, le double, if you want to use three languages to try to explain what it is. And in order to fix a little bit the idea about this concept, I will start with a work which is not by Colville, and that some of you may have seen in 1994 when Johan Hansen was presenting his sculpture here in the museum. It was a kind of strange experience to confront this type of sculpture because they are really very, very realistic, to the point that when you enter in the room, you are not sure if it's real people or artificial one. There's a kind of 1 second of hesitation. This one is called A Old Man Playing Solitaire, and the table is real, the cards, the play cards, even his clothing and everything, this is real stuff. The only thing that's not real, of course, is his head and hands, who are made with kind of special material. I think it's vinyl, or I don't know what. And so the first impression is that, is it real? Is it really somebody? And then after, you get the real impact of the sculpture, I think, when you realize it's a sculpture. And you become to look at it as if it was a regular piece of art in a museum. And then you feel embarrassed because you are like inside of his world, of the world of this old man. You know, this notion of the bubbles. I had a friend who was a little bit short-sighted, and he had the strange habit to speak to you too close. And I always says, okay, you enter my bubble, you know, get a little bit further. And this is a kind of an embarrassing, of course, it was not his fault, he was not just seeing well, but it's a fact that we have a kind of distance like that where we feel comfortable or not if somebody entrench it. And indeed, for these sculpture, you could go as close as you want, and people do that because they want to check if it's really a sculpture or not. And then suddenly you enter in this kind of intimacy of this old man is let's say, the fact that he have a spot of coffee on his shirt, that he's not really clean, that he seems to be very, at least, bored, if not depressed and everything. And then suddenly you want to get out of this. It's like too much. So there is a fascination with this idea of a double of reality, which is so close to reality that it's almost undistinguishable from it. And if you think of the origin of this fascination, especially in modern art, I could say one group of artists who are responsible of that, who have exploited it a lot, this idea of the double, are the surrealists. It goes, for instance, with Hans Bellmer dolls. He makes a series of these sadomasochist type of doll. This is what I show you on the screen is in fact a photography of that he did, and that he tinted a little bit with some minimum of color. And it's done with part of dolls associated together and creating this kind of monster sexual. It's very hard to define the type of. Bellmer is not a man I will put my daughter with in the same room. He's a kind of weird type of imagination, but to make it to link it to the theme that I want to suggest to start before really dealing with Colville, it is this idea of a doll will be like a double of reality, will be like something with parallel to reality. The other aspect of that is quite also typical of the surrealists, it is the use they made of mannequin. For instance, in this Rainy Taxi by Salvador Dali, was presented at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. You had a real whole taxi in which the rain, of course, is not outside the taxi, but inside of it. So when you look at it, you see suddenly water dripping inside, and that's why you have some little animals there, like slugs, that could live happily there. And indeed, after a while, you see them moving on the glass like this, as if they were in a kind of an aquarium. But inside of the taxi, you do have like personages like this, but in fact, who are fashion mannequin, you see, that are used for fashion usage, and create this kind of strange intermediary world in which, okay, the taxi is real, the slugs are real, everything, and there's really rain there, and these personages who are unreal, and you create this kind of strange feeling. They had also, in the exhibition of 1938 in Paris, just before the war, it was called, like many of their exhibitions, the Exposition Internationale of Surrealism. They had the Surrealist Street that they have created, in which each surrealist was asked to dress a mannequin in a certain way, you see, or create a personage like that, and they call it the Surrealist Street. Indeed, if it was real, if you were on the street and we see people dressed that way, it will be quite strange, you know, that will be kind of... this is the one done that you see here, done by André Masson, and the other his was done by Max Ernst, and so each of the artists have contributed like this of a mannequin. This interest of the surrealists, of course, is not special to them. You know about the novel of Frankenstein, for instance, in which, to my surprise, I've not read it recently, but in fact, Frankenstein, in the novel of Mrs. Shelley, Mary Shelley, who did that in 1817, is the name of the scientists who create the monster. It's not the name of the monster. The monster have no name. It's just done with part of corpses, and suddenly it animates itself. And think of a more recent example with Star Trek, let's say with Data, with this kind of android who's a little bit curious about human nature but have no emotion whatsoever. Anyway, this fascination with the double is certainly well répandue. It touched everybody. And in the painting of Colville, what I thought, I said, in a way, we could define the art of Colville as an attempt to create a double of reality. And not only of reality in general, but I would say even of his own reality. A lot of the personages of Colville are himself. He, of course, is not always very evident. He will turn his head or he will look down and all that, but it's him. We know enough of the photo of Colville to know that it's him, and I met him and all that. I can assure you that it's him, is in picture. It's also his wife, very often his children. And since he's an animal lover, you have also his dog and his cats, and everything of his world also are like presented again in this picture, in this painting. If we want to go to the root of this fascination with the double, I think we have to ask a kind of psychoanalytic question for that. How come we are so fascinated by the doll, the automata, for instance, or the mannequin, and all these forms, or even say the wax museum is a thing that people visit still, and Madame Tussaud in Paris, or we used to have one in my childhood near the L'Oratoire Saint-Joseph, of all places. You know, you could see there the terrible scene of Martyr being eaten by lions and things like that. I still remember them vividly. And there was also a guardian in wax also that was watching everybody. Anyway, this fascination, if you want to go to the root of it, I think we have to deal with psychoanalysis for that. And apparently Freud was also fascinated by that and wrote an essay which is called Das Unheimliche, Unheimlich means the strange or the uncanny, if you want, about this phenomenon of the double. Yeah? And he quote, he start by summarizing a story, kind of imaginary story by Hoffman, who's called The Sandman. And in that story, it's, in short, let's say, it's the love of a student who is called Nathaniel, and who buy a little magnifying glass, let's say, to look through it like this, that you could bring in your pocket, from an optician who's called Cupola. And then he watched through this, this glass, he watched a window in which a beautiful young woman appeared every night about the same time. And he thinks, the daughter of the professor Spallanzani. Each one have his name, of course, in that. And he falls in love with her. He finds it so beautiful, and he finally learned that she's called Olympia. And he goes there, finally, to ask her hand to his father. And entering in the house, he sees the optician and the professor are fighting together. And they are fighting with the Olympia, as if one pull her in one direction and the other in the other direction. And then there's a horrible scene. Her eyes fall on the ground. And then the student realized this was just a dummy, and it was not a real person, and he was in love, in fact, with somebody who was just a creation of these two weirdos guys. He becomes crazy, and finally he cannot overcome his shock and throw himself from a tower. It finished tragically, as it should. And okay, so then Freud, having summarized this little story, says it's evident here that the scene with the eyes who are falling on the ground are an image of the complex of castration, because the eye are very often kind of symbol of the genital organs, and because we cannot say it openly, okay, we invent these stories with that. And then he quote some expression, let's say, when we say, this is precious like the apple of my eye. In French, it's funny, we say la prunelle. I don't know why you have an apple and we have a plum, but it's not exactly, it's exactly the same meaning, but it's not exactly the same expression. And also all the obsession we have with our eyes that are so precious and all that. And so, in fact, what if it is just thinking of physical mutilation here, I think it's too narrow. What is the basic of this? Why this scene is so unheimlich? Why it's so strange and uncanny? It is because the student have this idea all his life that these eyes were living. And suddenly he discovered that they are not, that they are dead. In fact, they are just done with glass and something like that. And it is this border between the living and the dead who is, in a way, violated, that makes the uncanniness of the scene. And indeed, we could find, let's say, a kind of confirmation with that, with this very ancient idea of the double, let's say, like, for instance, in ancient Egypt, where the mummy was a kind of almost replica, the best replica possible of the deceased, in order that it will survive, that it will be able to live after death. It was almost a way to negate death. You create a double of yourself and you prolongate like this your existence in afterlife endlessly. For the Egyptian, where the expectancy of life was about 35 years, 40, I guess this idea of an eternal life was very important, because life was short and brutal, and like Hobbes used to say, so the idea of having a possibility to prolongate it. But like Freud says about that, he says that this is rooted, of course, in a kind of narcissism, because it's the idea that the human self is indestructible, it could be prolongated like this endlessly. And he says when we grew out of this narcissistic idea that we can be perfectly kept like this endlessly, we became this idea that the double negate the death, evaluate towards something else, become like a premonition, an harbinger of death instead. The double, instead of the assurance that I will survive, becomes a presage, become a kind of harbinger of death, a forerunner of what is coming. And that's why it's uncanny, and that's why it's scary, and that's why we have this reaction with it. I have just another illustration of that with Egyptian art. Let's say this is the Book of the Deaf, in which you see here Osiris, one of the great dog of the underworld, bringing a couple. In fact, here it's the governor Hani, and in front of the main god here, which is Ra, his soul is weighted and all that to see if he's good or bad, and if he's good, he could go to heaven, if he's bad, he will go to hell. And anyway, you have all these, certainly, all these beliefs. Let's say, you could say that the first double, in a way, it's the soul, you know. It's even the term that we use, the shadows, in terms not only of the shadow concretely, let's say the shadow that I project on the ground, but also a kind of weird phantom or ghost of afterlife. The shadows could have that meaning too. So the first meaning is certainly kind of denegation of death, like you have in this work of art, and then suddenly it becomes more something uncanny, something bizarre, and a little bit that give fear, that have the other type of implication. The way to get out of this, of course, it is through relationship to others, to real others. If you keep in this kind of primary narcissism, where you are the only person who counts, who could be prolongated like that, well, you will never encounter anybody in a way. So the way to get out is this. And Freud made this remark, which I find quite interesting also. He said, in a way, for the unconscious, we never believe in our own death. You could say, even when we dream that we are dead, we dream that, for instance, you are in your tomb, but you hear people speaking around you. You hear people say, oh, okay, wow, this is fantastic, he's dead, we will have his inheritance, or whatever terrible things. And in fact, you are there, you are assisting to your own death. For the unconscious, the personal death doesn't exist. Mind you, for the same unconscious, the death of many others exists. You could kill this one, kill your father, marry your mother, whatever. See, all this is possible, but your own death, no. And it is basically because it's a kind of the first, I would say, narcissism of the ego who is there, who is indestructible in a way. It's like the basis, and it's only when you go out of this, when you begin to have a kind of relationship with other people, that this kind of indestructibility feeling that you had before could change in something else and could evaluate. Okay, after this bizarre introduction, I will now deal with Colville. Don't worry. Okay, Colville is born in Toronto, but he was not to live there long. He was born in 1920, still not a young man, but he's still active, I think. And the family have moved to Nova Scotia quite early. And he did whatever aspiring young artist had to do. He went to the University of Mount Allison, and he follows there the art course and everything. And but suddenly the war come, and he was just married a few months before, and he's called with the army, and he goes to live in Europe for about 2 years as a war artist. And when they come back finally to Ottawa after the war, the artists like him who had been war artists, you know what it was. It was people who are following the lines and trying to depict by drawings and picture rather than photography. The army thought that only painters could really get the gist of the action and things like that and see it as it is, and being able to synthesize it in a better way than photography. And so when they come back in Ottawa, they were giving a studio, and this picture is called Infantry near Nijmegen in Holland. It's dated 1946 because precisely it was done, let's say it's based on sketches done on the spot, but when he came back to Ottawa, he had time to do that. And finally, Colville will not stay there, of course. He will go back to Wolfville and then to Sackville, and will teach in the very university where he got his first formation in art. And up to 63, after that, he will be wealthy enough with his painting not to need to teach anymore, which I wish to every art student here. And then he worked like this all his life. Colville writes from time to time about his painting, giving what he thinks, but it's so, you know, with deadpan type of commentary that if we had only that, we will finish the lecture in about 6 minutes. For instance, he says, on February 1, I envisaged my first big canvas, the subject being infantry marching in single file along a road. Okay, it's exactly what it is. The infantry marching in one along the road. Okay. In fact, if you look at the first of these infantrymen, they have kind of under cast eyes. They are looking on the ground. And where do we see this look before in this lecture? It was with Johan Hansen personage. It's exactly the same type of look, in which, in a way, to resist to the invasion of the onlooker, of the spectator, of us, the only defense you have is to overcast your eyes, to close them, or to look to the ground. And of course, what he suggests here, it is that each soldier is in his little universe. Each one think of what he left, of what he will see, will he survive, or things like that, whatever their thought, but each one is immersed in their thought, and they walk like this, like one author, Mark Cheetham, says, on automatic pilot. And I think the metaphor is interesting because we have the automat here. We have something who is like a mechanic in which, because of the war situation, humanity, the subjectivity, let's say, is reduced to almost nothing. You are just like a mechanic in a way, and all people are dressed the same, all people have more or less the same thought, and you have a kind of heavy transforming, materialization, let's say, of the spirit because of the situation in which they are. And so he could have certainly, he did many of these pictures, of war pictures, that in fact are not in the Museum of Art, like we could expect. They are in the War Museum in Ottawa, that you know, just near the National Gallery, you have a war museum with a big tank in front, and nobody goes there because of the tank. We're so scared. Anyway, we don't visit that much, but this is where these war pictures are. Of course, he will not stick to that, as you know, and he will present after a very different type of picture. This one, again, the title of Colville are always the same, very, very simple, as close as possible to what you see. What you see is what you get. Woman, man, and boat. 1952. Woman, man, and boat. But if you think of it, this is more or less a kind of transposition of a thing that he just lived before. He was overseas, and he came back, and he met his wife, and also his son, that he was born in between. He had never seen his son Graham before. When he left, his wife was pregnant, and when he came back, he had a son. And so in a way, this is a kind of stylization of a real situation for Colville, something you could really call autobiographical. It is as if him in a boat coming toward the wife that he has missed for all this time, and her going toward him in the water toward him. This being said, when you look at the picture, you have a strange feeling because there is a strong derealization of what we see here. For instance, there's no shadow, no reflection whatsoever, no wake of this boat. Everything seems like glued on a kind of background, as if these personages were really like floating in midair, being almost unreal. And this, as if the relationship that he wants to express is not emotionally invested, really. As if he wants to stay distant and cold in comparison to the feeling he must have had at that time. As if there was an effort to derealize them. And you will see this will be a kind of constant that we'll find in Colville. And it's always, at first we don't notice it too much, but there's no shadow, no reflection, and there's no movement of things. Things are rather static like this, as if you, for a painter who claimed to be a realist, you have also an effort to be not unrealistic, but at least to derealize, to detach things from reality in a certain way. And the fact that he attacks shadows and reflection is not neutral to my mind, because think of it, you see, according to the legend of the ancient, the discovery of painting was linked to the phenomenon of the shadow. It's Pliny, I think I've told you that already, I don't know, I will repeat myself because it's such an incredible story. It's Pliny who tells the story that the first painting was done by a woman and not by a man, who was, because her fiancé was going in a trip, and she wanted to fix on the wall his profile, and she saw with the shadow that she could underline exactly the profile and keep it. So even the very idea of painting reality is linked also to the shadow. And the reflection also, think of mirror. Mirror are a team in a team in a team. In a way, it's a kind of mise en abîme like this of what reality is for a painter. Is something that you want to fix like in a mirror. So this idea of attacking both shadow and reflection is not neutral at all. I think it's very conscious, since you find it in so many pictures, one after the other. There's another picture where you have another aspect of Colville world, I would say. It is this one. Okay, again, the title is illuminating, Nude and Dummy. Nude and Dummy. Okay, 1950. It's done before the other one, but I think it's a more important picture, this one, in which that announces more what will come and is less autobiographical in a way. And it's very close to the story that I was telling you in the beginning, because indeed we have a mannequin here in the foreground. We have a kind of, not only a representation of a naked lady, if you want, but you have also this dummy who is like a double of the person who is there. A little bit like in the story of the Sandman that I was telling you after Freud, after Hoffman. Except that we are not looking to it through a window and from far. We are in the room, in a way. And this creates, of course, a very strange type of relationship between the onlooker and the painting, because what are we doing there, really, and what she's doing there, either, it's not very clear. This, okay, there's this uncanniness to the situation, and also we realize suddenly that this is a painting which is very, very much constructed. For instance, this axis is exactly the center of the picture. It's built on, let's say, two rectangles, one beside the other. And there is indeed, Colville have made a lot of those sketches in which you have all the geometric line, a circle and triangles and all that, as if he wanted really to reduce the subject matter to a kind of grid which imposed on it and will correct it all the time. And this, he says, is the first painting where he used this grid, and that he will do after all the time, you see. And in a way, it's also almost like a trap. If I go back to this kind of first uncanny feeling we had with a painting, for the woman, she's looking above her shoulder, a little bit like we do when we have this impression that somebody is looking behind you. When there's nobody, of course. If there's somebody, it's easy to solve. But suddenly, you have the feet, something look behind me, and you will have more or less this type of gesture. This idea that some presence are behind like this all the time add to this uncanniness you see in this picture. I think he felt that this was the type of world in which really he wanted to explore and to inform. As much as we can see Colville as, and he see himself like this also, a man of good, solid, conservative values, let's say. Oh, and when I thought of the surrealists to begin with, I said, this is the last group of people that Colville will be interested in. But in fact, the more you go in his picture and you try to analyze, not so much his intention, but the way you react to it, you realize that he's working with this kind of uncanniness. And by the way, the shadows is reduced to almost nothing here. And there's no way, okay, you could, this is not a mirror, this is a window, but there's no way we can see from outside what is exactly there. And the bareness of the place also is bizarre, is something strange. Okay, we arrived then to another picture. We saw child and dog. Now I will not give the title, and you will be able to guess them, okay? 1952, and it's apparently a representation of one of his daughter with his dog, a black Labrador. And at first, I said, again, we have this kind of uncanniness. This big dog could maybe harm the child, but the Labrador is the last dog that will harm a child, as you know. But he may, suddenly, if he may want to protect her and run just say without making too much, being too much aware of what he's doing, he can hurt her on the way, and she could pull his ear. I don't know what can happen, but okay, they are confronted like that. And you have, of course, many interpretations of this picture. As you know, Colville was fortunate enough to have many important books published on him. David Burnett make an interesting book on him, and Mrs. Ellen Dow also. Mind you, Helen Dow have the tendency to see moralistic and theological content in picture of Colville. In this one, she says it's an opposition between the darkness and the light, and as the good and evil. But then she explained further on that the evil is in man and not in the animals, so I got confused. I don't know which is which. Anyway, well, I thought myself that there was a possibility to make a kind of religious reference here, but by translating in psychological term too. In a way, when do you see in the iconography the juxtaposition of a naked baby or a baby with animals? And of course, the scene, we think right away, if you are a Christian, it is the scene of the Nativity, in which the infant Jesus is with, not a dog, but a bull and a donkey. And as if you see at this moment of the apparition of the infant child and the divine child, if you want, all the creation will be around him. You will have also, of course, the angels. And I thought of the Botticelli interpretation of that, because Botticelli is a painter also who's close to Colville in style, of the same type of approach, very calculated and very a little bit cold like this also. And but the theme of this this perfect moment of the childhood, when all the universe is around him, this is le divin enfant. All the babies are like that, are so cute, it's so perfect. And we give them a kind of ego boosting for life. Animals come, parents, everybody, it's so... And Christian children have a system which is fantastic. Every year in Christmas, they get a guy coming from heaven, you know, bringing gifts and saying how great they are and wonderful and all that. So we reinforce that all the time. So this type of juxtaposition, if you want, of child and animals, even if at first it seems uncanny, a little bit dangerous situation, in fact, it relates to a kind of very profound type of iconographic theme of the infant being like the center of creation, being very precious and very entouré, like this, with the parents, with the whole universe. The theme of the family have interested, of course, Colville from time to time. And as I told you, it is very often his own family that is represented, like his wife and two of his children there. The little boy who was born when he was at in the army is there, Graham, and the little girl, Anne. And the family and rainstorm, because, of course, what you see in the background here, it's a kind of rainstorm starting, and the kids and the mother were on the beach, and they have to, of course, to stop their sortie, because suddenly there is a storm. They have to get back to the car and go back home. They don't look too deceived. And indeed, in Colville, it's very hard to find what people really think and what they are, because first of all, you don't see their face. They turn their face, but even in their attitude, well, okay, that's it, there's storm. My kids will have shouted at me and would say, "Are you idiot? We want to stay," and everything. But here they seem to be good kids, you know, that will obey their mother and go back to the car and go home. And indeed, when Colville trying to explain this picture, the word he uses is acceptance. And this is quite, I think, profound also as an attitude toward the world. Colville is not a revolutionary in that sense. He doesn't, not subversive. He's acceptance. You accept the things as they are. You want, of course, to find a meaning in it. But the first attitude is that, is acceptance. It's not to put in question. The other series of pictures that I want to show you now are dealing with the couple in a way. The couple on beach, like this one, 1957. Again, it's him and his wife, Rhoda. Even if we don't have any clue of her face, she's covering her head with a hat. And you remember what I said about the sea and the separation, and then of course the sea is behind them. They are together now on the beach, and in a way it's for Colville the sea is the big separation, and so or you get this idea of coming back toward the say the bank of the sea, or you are separated by the sea. But there, of course, the couple is together on the same size. The Colville commented that, again, it seems a little bit more elaborated, but you will see, again, it's almost just a description of what we see there. He was asked, what is the man is looking at? Is he looking at his wife? Is he looking at he says, what is being contemplated is the woman, the sea, and the sky. This is not too compromising, of course, it's the three of them. The painting is about love in the context of nature, that is, in a setting or environment of nature, probably something about the relationship between the temporal and the eternal. Each complements the other. And when I say about love, I mean about the feeling of love, the sensation. I think because this is quoted in the book of Helen Dow, because he wants her to stay on the ground, you see, so he insists that what he's expressing here is the feeling. And indeed, he was right, because then right away she starts with a long disquisition on agape and eros, and the distinction between both and all that. So we are too far from the picture, I think, at that moment. And this idea of a kind of a relationship, but a relationship in which not much is exchanged in a way. And I think maybe more revealing was another reflection of Colville about this picture, where he says, I believe strongly that the strength of a relationship lies in the recognition of each person's independence. And in a way, this is what's happening there. They are together. They are certainly a couple, but they have each one his own world. He's looking at the sea or whatever, the sky, the formation of clouds, and she is immersed in her own world with her hat on her head. No, if there is an exchange of some words there, it's very limited. How are you? Do you want crème solaire? I don't know what. Bon. And now let's see the same theme, but a little bit more complex now. It's called June Noon, 1963, in which, again, you see the same couple. The man who is there is certainly Colville, and he's looking with binoculars, looking at the sea. And his wife is inside the tent, but naked, and apparently drying herself. There is a kind of towel there. And, okay, there's a kind of an opposition between an enclosed area where she is, but where she's seen, and another very open area where he is looking. And this type of division of labor, if you want, where the woman is the object of seeing, of regard, is the one who are looked at, and the man who is looking is in a way a very classical type of division of labor. Man have always been the one who looks, and the woman being the object of his look. And you would say I will make some parallel with great artists who have dealt with this theme, and you would see where Colville, in a way, trying to find his situation in that. We are like witness of almost inside the tent. We, the onlooker. And him is outside, like a little bit indifferent to what's happening. And you have suddenly one of the big theme here is visuality. It is what is the role of the look in picture, and eventually in a scene like that. Look again, this theme of visuality here is again very explicit, except that now you have the impression that the roles are reversed. It is called To Prince Edward Island. The picture is called To Prince Edward Island, 1965. And now it's the woman who's looking, and the man who is behind her is again Colville. You see his hand on each side. But in a way, he could be now the one we look at. But we cannot, because he's hidden by the wife and by this big binocular also that she have in front of her. And if you try to put these things in context with the tradition of modern art, you will see exactly where this type of picture is situated. First, let's say the first thing I thought when I saw this, is in a way, it's exactly the opposite of Renoir's famous painting. I would call The Box, in which the woman is the spectacle, if you want, and the man is looking through a little lunette like this. Let's say when these people were going to the theater, they have these little glasses, and not to look at the scene my way. Well, but look where he's looking, this guy. He's not looking at what's happening on the theater. He's looking to another girl as beautiful as this one. And that's what's the main purpose of that. And this, you could say Renoir now give you the classical way to interpret visuality in painting of, let's say, of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. In comparison, you could say, well, Colville reverse the situation, since it's the woman now who's looking, and the man, and then you see that it's not exactly the same thing. The man is not objet de regard. The man is not the object of your look, since he's hiding behind the wife. So I thought, okay, maybe there is other solution to the same problem. And indeed, you have, I think, the real solution to the problem. It's Mary Cassatt who found it. And this is a painting of Mary Cassatt, you know, is a famous American painter, but lived in Paris for almost all her career, and also was quite close to Degas. She was Degas was terrible misogyne. He didn't like women, but he made an exception with Mary Cassatt. He respected her, and he found her a very important artist. This painting is done in 1878, so it's really the end of the 19th century. And what Mary Cassatt did here, it is to give indeed the binocular to the woman, and to make her in profile in a way that she's looking in front of her, not to another guy or something like in the Renoir picture. And in a way, you can even demonstrate that she consciously opposed to the Renoir picture, because if you look carefully, here in the balcony, you have a man with binocular who's looking at her. Huh? And as if she wanted to detach herself from this type of things, from this type of conception of the woman as being only the object of the look, that could be also actively participating in the look. And indeed, she shows enough of the intensity in the eye that you could see that she is claiming this right. She's not only looking at what is in front of her, but is claiming this right. And then you could say, okay, this is maybe a little bit what Colville tried to do, but not with such a strong, let's say, statement that you have in the Mary Cassatt work. And in fact, what is closer to Colville's solution is the Degas solution. Degas have presented also women who are looking through binocular, like you see here, but there's something very strange happened. She's looking in front, like in the picture of Colville, but she's very weird. She looks like a big insect with kind of strange eyes. It's a little bit like in this horror movie. When a woman sees the monster, she's transformed in a monster. Right? She's always attacking, and she opens a little bit the door, and then it's all. To look is dangerous. To look could be punished. And this is more or less what Degas is expressing here. When a woman looks, she's transformed in a monster. She becomes a kind of with an insect head and things like that. And in a way, if you go back to Colville, you see this is the solution of Colville too. This is the woman with these huge eyes like this who's looking at you is like also like an insect. And the man still keep his position of being not looked at. And I would say by dealing with this theme, Colville was getting on a very mine ground, where there was a lot of reflection done already by modern artists, and he had to find his way like this. But I think it's interesting to confront it to the main solution of this type of problem, to see what he did. You understand why visuality is cogent to what I'm saying here, because of course all this question of the double, of the mirror and of the reflection is also linked to what we see, what kind of standing we have as a onlooker toward the scene. This slide is a little bit dark, but I think you see a dog here coming on the bridge. It's called Dog and Bridge, 1976. And this picture would have had a certain relationship with visuality also, because we see by the sketches that Colville had done in preparation to this picture that the first idea was to have a blind man with a dog. Like to go with a dog who is able to see the way and to help the blind man to find his way. And finally, he suppressed the blind man. He didn't keep this idea. And he kept only the idea of a bridge with a dog who seems to go we don't know where, and then give, of course, another meaning to it. I have a nice text of Michael Greenwood on this picture that I think goes to the deep meaning of it. He says, in a recent painting, Dog and Bridge, a superbly disciplined composition, human mastery of nature is represented in the precise conceptual ingenuity and physical strength of the bridge. Of course, the bridge is like kind of an intervention, let's say, of culture in nature. The hound that confronts us is not barring the way across, but is clearly in relentless pursuit along tracks that denote the inescapable course of predetermined destiny. The bridge that carries the destiny across the river, past and future, is all that conscious ingenuity can achieve. A transitional medium of ideas that may provide for immediate necessity, but cannot control the future. In iconographic tradition, the dog is the faithful companion in the human pilgrimage through time, but he also accompanies the traveler across the bridge that divides temporal existence from eternity. And indeed, you know, dogs are, according to the mythology, are in at the entrance of hell. They are there to, in a way, guard the division between life and death. And then this idea of a dog who's walking like this alone on a bridge could have some relation to that. This theme, of course, could be illustrated again by the belief of the ancient Egyptian, like this beautiful, it's not the dog, it's a chacal, but who have exactly this role, you see, of being the guardian of the underworld. And I thought I had also a picture by Jackson Pollock, okay, the exact opposite of Colville. They cannot be further apart. But in this picture, Pollock entitled it The Guardians of the Secret. Okay, the secret could be seen as this huge panel here in the middle. And if you look carefully down here, you have a dog also, it's with pointed ear. And maybe two personages on each side here who are like the guardian of the secret. One of these personages extends his hand on the big canvas, if you want. And above there you have a kind of red spot who looks like a chicken. And the story goes that when Jackson Pollock was young, was maybe in his early teens, he was living on a farm in Wyoming, so quite far in the United States. And the kids were bored, and suddenly one of the older one had this incredible idea of, okay, who is chicken here? So put your hand on a stump here, and with an axe, I would just give a blow just between your finger. And nobody wanted to do it except Jackson, of course. He wanted to be tough like the others, so put his hand there, and suddenly the axe fell just on his finger and cut a little bit of his index. You have photo of Pollock where you see it exactly like that. Okay, this is already horrible, but what is worse, it is that there was a rooster there that comes and eat the finger. And this is what is left of it in the picture. If you look at the red spot here, it looks a little bit like a rooster, and as if also the extended hand. And okay, Pollock is much more immersed, let's say, in Jungian psychology and Freudian and all that. So he wanted to say, okay, the guardian of the secret is the guardian of the unconscious in a way. But the presence of a dog there is interesting. It is, he says, I think it's a father image. And I was asking myself also, it can be that also for Colville, this dog who is on the bridge in between life and death and between past and future could be also eventually a kind of father image of the same kind. The animal are certainly a theme that have interested Colville immensely. Moon and Cow here of 1963. I think you find in the animal a kind of serenity, and in a cow, the serenity reaches stupidity. It's wonderful. It's so serene that it's idiot. But anyway, but he resists. Colville resists to his interpretation. He says, no. He says, I think it's a quality. This kind of fact that the animal is calming also, and indeed you have many domestic animals in his iconography. Cows, dogs, of course, are important, cats and things animals close to it. And once he says that he heard about a kind of cult, let's say, where people have rules, and the rules what? They are no liquor, no drugs, and no dogs. And he said, I thought this was very strange because to me, the presence of animals seems absolutely necessary. I feel that without animals, everything is incomplete. So and he says, I think of animal incapable of evil. And I certainly don't think this about people. He was through war, and so he knew it. The idea of a bad dog is absolutely inconceivable to me, unless it has been driven crazy by people. So this idea that animals are representing a part of the world, let's say, that in which you have no conflict, let's say. They are completely immersed in the universe, and you remember this theme of acceptance I made before. They are the acceptance by excellence, you see, these domestic animals. So you represent now the cow lying in a field with the moon also having the same type of serenity, if you want, to it. And even the matching color of all this, the integration of all the elements there, make it one of these animal pictures who are very, very typical of what he did. This one also with Stop for Cows, it's called, 1967, in which you see a girl making a gesture and looking rather high. So you could imagine that what she's looking at is a truck. It's not a car, it's something quite high. And she wants to protect the cow, let them cross habitually they are very good for that, to come back in the street and go like this. They are fantaisistes, a little bit. But what I remember that the first time I saw that picture, what struck me so strongly here, it is the absence of shadow in this picture. If you become to be aware of that, the cows looks almost floating in midair. They are not really on the ground. They look like suspended in this. And the idea of a person without shadow, this is an immense, let's say, folkloric appeal in a way. You may have, some of you are maybe opera fans, and know about Richard Strauss' opera, The Woman Without Shadow. And the story of this opera is that it's somebody without shadow cannot be the mother of children. And so the story goes that she have to become pregnant in a certain amount of time, and she cannot do it, and then her helper have a trick. She says, okay, I will go to somebody who have already children, and I will buy her shadow, and I will give it to you, and then you will be fertile. So this idea of being without shadow, it's also, in a way, going toward death, in a way. It's on fertility. It's associated with infertility in many, many legends and beliefs, I'd say, that you will find in universal folklore. As I told you, the shadow is the double, and the absence of shadow is certainly a way to express this idea that we are transparent then, and we don't cast a shadow, we don't have any fertility. The author, at least for my culture, let's say, because I read more French than English, but I'm sure you could find an example of that in English too. It's a story of Maupassant, who's called Le Horla. And the Horla is the story of a man who's turning crazy, more or less, because he thinks that there is this kind of creature who is in his room, and he's always looking behind him and trying to find him, but it's all in his imagination. But there's a fantastic scene at a certain point where, in full daylight, he's looking at the mirror, and he doesn't see his reflection. And then you realize that he's turning crazy, because if you are in front of a mirror and you don't see any reflection, your mind is dead. Something happened. And all these themes, all the time, the shadow, the reflection, all that, always are intertwined like this. And again and again, you find them in Colville, like implicitly in this picture. And this one, of course, it's very clear. I was thinking, do we have mirror in Colville art? In a way, we don't have directly, but in a way we have. Like here, you see the River Thames, 1974, where you see a woman looking at the Thames in London. She has no shadow, of course, and no reflection, but there is some reflection of the landscape there, let's see, the houses there, but they are a little bit erased by the movement of the water on the top here, as if, and indeed you realize that she have an umbrella, so it's probably raining, and so the reflection cannot be perfect. So if there is a mirror, like here, with the water is working like a mirror, it's also a mirror that doesn't really give a reflection. A little bit like my story of La Horla, in which you have the possibility to make a reflection, but it's not there. The other world in which Colville could deal with, I think, is the world of the dream itself, where, of course, the idea of a double is important, because in dream, even if we have many personages and all that, we're all told that we dream essentially of ourselves. And the personages in the dream, even if there are 2 or 3, are always representing an aspect or the other of our own person. This picture is called Berlin Bus, 1978. Have been done by Colville. Well, let's say the first draft and all that, the first idea was in 1971, when he was invited by a consular program in Berlin. You see a kind of guest artist program. And he was offered to live in Berlin in a wonderful studio and all that for a year. But it was the first time he went back after the war to Germany. And it was a kind of ambiguous feeling, of course. Berlin, after all, was the headquarters of the Nazi during the war. But he accepted for 6 months, saying, well, I will really make a short stay there. Took a lot of pictures, was fascinated by these double-deck buses that are in Berlin. And if I'm not mistaken, also, you have on the bus a kind of advertisement for a newspaper, the Morgen Post, hat will gute Zeiten. So I will check with my German friend if I translated well. Something, the Morning Star have many pages, but also have many sides, are indeed. So it's a kind of an advertisement on the bus. And you have here a kind of absurd shield with a bear, and written above, it's hard to see where you are, but notar. So it's a notary. So really, all this this kind of combination, and also of this girl running like dressed like a tennis player and running her hell off. I don't know if you saw the film Lola, Run, Lola. This is exactly what I felt about it. It's like running like crazy in a place where for a bus, we are told not to run after a bus, as you know. And there is a situation, it's almost like dreamlike. And it will fit also with the color that are kept here in the picture. It's this kind of weird gray, as if we were really in a dream in a way. So there is a juxtaposition of many sources of this little ad for a notarian, and then the bus, and then finally the girl running. Because the dream world is also a kind of a realm of the double. Colville, I've said not exactly about this painting, but about this type of situation that is depicted. I do not find life boring or banal, because he was referring to an Arendt famous idea, the banality of evil. You know that Arendt was a philosopher who works a lot about the totalitarianism, and her intuition was that even people like Heitman and all that are very banal people, the banality of evil. And he opposed that a little bit, saying that what I want to try to find it is even in something that looks very common and ordinary, something more mysterious, more magical, if you want, that what we have. Consequently, he says, I'm not in flight from what might be called ordinary experience. Hannah Arendt has written of the banality of evil. I once said that I painted person, animals, situation, which I consider wholly good. I mean not banal in that sense. But then, of course, there is, I think, with all this reflection that I made on the double and death and all that, you could expect also Colville dealing with death. And you have the three last pictures I will show you are dealing with this theme in a way. This one is called Pacific, 1967. It was painted in California. Again, he was a guest artist for, in Berkeley. So in the foreground, you have this gun, which is rather ominous, on a table where I don't know if you can see it, but there is numbers written here, as if it was a table used to measure things, as if you had a ruler inside of the table. Then you have this man who is certainly Colville, who is looking at the sea, and all this is in a little glass house here. The commentary he made about it is a kind of opposition between the serenity of the sea, let's say, of peace in front of it, and the war behind. This was painted in United States at a time when, okay, you had the assassination of Kennedy, and then the assassination of Martin Luther King, two, I would say, father figures who were destroyed, and then finally also the Vietnam War starting again. All this period was supposed to be maybe peaceful and great, suddenly turned very evil and all that. So you could say that being in the States, being in the West Coast also, this idea impregnated a little bit the picture too, this opposition between what is behind him. Some people have mentioned suicide about this painting, but Colville have rejected that interpretation because for him, guns are in a way always an instrument of precision, of smart decision, and not a thing to be irrational with. So, and he's a target shooter himself. And that's why gun for him is associated also with precise decision and not with irrationality. So he refused this interpretation. But I think the more broad theme of opposition between past and future and the uncertainty of peace ahead could be closer to what he wants to express here. And here again, you have a picture of himself this time, facing us. It's one of the rare pictures in which you see him really in front. And it's called Target Pistol and Man. Target pistol, of course, that you see in the foreground, and him hiding his mouth a little bit because a painter, of course, doesn't express himself by words, express himself by picture. And we are sure that he used a mirror to do this picture because if you notice on his finger, the ring is on the right hand, and normally it should be on the left. And so he, using a mirror, it have transformed, of course, the image in that sense. And this is his studio. It's the only painter I know that has such a clean studio. Right? I never saw the only Colville. It's incredible. Everything is in place, as if he was using, I don't know what, the powder, I don't know what. Anyway, he completely, this is really as it is in Wolfville. And now he decided to, like he says, to really show himself. Finally, he said, why to be always in the hiding? And he says that maybe my whole age, some narcissism of youth is coming back. And indeed, in a way, you could say that he's alluding to a famous picture by Caravaggio who represent Narcissus like this. As you know, the legend, of course, the young man fall in love with his own reflection. And this infatuation with himself killed him, in a way. And he was replaced after by these beautiful flowers, who's called the Narcissi, as you know. And so this idea of a mirror image, let's say, of himself also, I think closed a little bit the exploration of one of the themes important in all this, when you think of the double, is certainly the mirror. And the last picture that I wanted to show you, it's again dealing with violence. It is, in fact, called In the Woods, 1976. And when you see, again, one of these target shooters, but the fact that they are in the wood are a little bit mysterious. And apparently, Colville make a reference to a film which is called The Conformist. I don't know if you saw it. It's the Bertolucci film. which is the story of a man who wants to be accepted in a fascist party before the war with Mussolini, and offered to kill a professor who is a leftist and who live in Paris. So he goes with his young wife and all that. Well, there's a lot of things. But there's a scene in the film where the killing of this professor took place in a wood. And it's, in a way, it's a very beautiful scene because, like in the picture of Colville, the sun is low and you have these rays of lights everywhere, and then you see this horrible scene of shooting by against this man. And okay, then Colville deal with violence eventually. He have this idea that he takes from the great writer Conrad, that civilization is always fragile, that it doesn't ask much to make it disappear. He says that the Canadians are very naive about that. They think that everything is okay and all that. He says, I do have a fear of chaos and a strong sense of the fragility of civilization. I have contempt for apolitical people. If people take civilization for granted, it all falls apart. And you could say, well, maybe this is again the message of this. Colville is a special case in realism. As you can see, I insisted all the time on this uncanniness, on this aspect of not to take too easily for granted what you are seeing, that there is a kind of more deep meaning. Maybe it has some psychological roots, this is impossible really to decide, but certainly for our experience of this painting, we do feel that. We do feel this uncanniness, and we have to respond to it. And even if it's one of the dimension of it is violence, so you understand also that this fit with the rest. Okay, this brings us to the last of these lectures. I thank you for your attendance. It was wonderful. You were very faithful, even in summer. I took pleasure of giving it, as you may have noticed, and I may do it again next year, thinking maybe to work on the theme of the figure in Canadian art. We dealt with so I would start with Plamondon, César Côté, and end up with Michael Snow, maybe, or something like that. But we will have, maybe, if God is good to me, an occasion to see again. So thank you for your